The most terrifying sound in the world isn't a scream in the dark. It is the sound of your own mother pouring a second glass of Pinot Noir while casually discussing how to lock you in a psychiatric ward. Silas stood frozen in the hallway, the hardwood floor biting through his socks, as the voices drifted from the kitchen. The air smelled sharply of citrus polish and betrayal. "We just need one more outburst," his mother, Beatrice, murmured, her tone as smooth and cold as polished marble. "Dr. Aris is ready to sign the evaluation. Once Silas is committed, you get temporary power of attorney. The kids stay here, the assets freeze, and we liquidate the offshore accounts before he even understands what room he's in." A brittle, breathy laugh followed. It belonged to Veronica, the woman Silas had shared a bed with for 9 years. "Tristan thinks we're moving too slow. He wants to start looking at summer homes, but I told him patience. By Christmas, Silas will be wearing slip-on shoes in a locked ward and the house will be ours." Silas didn't breathe. He didn't blink. The metallic tang of copper flooded his mouth. He had bitten the inside of his cheek so hard it bled. He backed away, step by silent step, until he reached the heavy fire door leading to the garage. He slipped inside, the heavy scent of motor oil and sawdust wrapping around him like a heavy blanket. This was his sanctuary, the only room in the sprawling, sterile house that Veronica hadn't sterilized with her obsessive, minimalist aesthetics. Silas slumped against his workbench, a profound, suffocating paralysis gripping his chest. His own wife, his own mother. They weren't just plotting a divorce, they were meticulously planning his absolute erasure. And Tristan, the overly groomed, perpetually grinning neighbor whose hedge trimmer Silas had borrowed last week, was the prize Veronica was waiting to claim. For an hour, Silas sat in the dark, letting the despair wash over him. He thought of his 2 young children sleeping upstairs, completely unaware that the 2 women who were supposed to nurture them were actively weaving a net to steal their future. Then he noticed the faint, rhythmic blinking of the garage door sensor, a tiny red light in the darkness. It sparked a quiet, dangerous realization. Veronica and Beatrice were arrogant. They believed Silas was entirely broken, a passive workhorse too beaten down by years of Veronica's verbal acid to ever fight back. Their hubris had blinded them. They hadn't considered that cornering a man with nothing left to lose is the fastest way to forge a monster. The next morning, the transformation began. Silas didn't wake up with a roar, he woke up with a chilling, absolute clarity. Over breakfast, as Veronica sneered at how he chewed his toast and Beatrice offered passive-aggressive critiques of his parenting, Silas simply nodded, offering a weak, defeated smile. He played the exact role they had scripted for him, the broken, compliant husband. But beneath the docile exterior, a brilliant, ruthless architect was drawing blueprints. The first phase required eyes. Veronica had recently developed a sudden, obsessive paranoia about her growing collection of diamond tennis bracelets and emerald pendants. Gifts Silas now realized were funded by Tristan. Silas used her vanity against her. He suggested, with a manufactured stammer of anxiety, that they needed a state-of-the-art security system. Veronica, eager to protect her illicit spoils, agreed dismissively. Silas hired a professional firm for the perimeter, but the interior was his domain. Over 3 sleepless nights, while Veronica claimed to be at late-night yoga, Silas wired the house. 14 pinhole lenses, smaller than a grain of rice, were embedded into the crown molding of the living room, the smoke detector in the master bedroom, the ornate chandelier in the dining room, and the children's playroom. They fed directly into an encrypted server bolted beneath the floorboards of his garage. The initial footage was agonizing to watch. Seeing Tristan's athletic frame pressed against his wife in the kitchen, their whispered mockery of his supposed incompetence felt like swallowing broken glass. But Silas learned to compartmentalize the pain, turning his grief into a cold, clinical data collection exercise. The cameras captured more than just adultery. They captured the true rot of the conspiracy. Silas recorded Beatrice coaching his 7-year-old daughter to say that "Daddy yells at the walls when no one is looking." He recorded Veronica on the phone with Beatrice's friend, a notoriously corrupt family court judge, casually discussing the exact phrasing needed on the involuntary commitment forms to bypass standard legal scrutiny. With a mountain of digital poison safely stored on encrypted hard drives, Silas moved to Phase 2, financial hemorrhage. He couldn't just leave. He had to ensure the empire they sought to steal was a hollow shell by the time they breached the gates. He sought out Elias Vance, a forensic accountant turned ruthless divorce attorney who operated out of a dimly lit, oak-paneled office downtown. Elias was a man who spoke in sharp, clipped sentences and possessed the moral flexibility required to counter a corrupt judge. "They want to declare you incompetent," Elias said, dragging a fountain pen across a legal pad. "So, we prove you are the most competent man in the state. You need 3 independent psychiatric evaluations from board-certified doctors outside their sphere of influence. We file them preemptively under seal. When they bring their forged document, we spring the trap." Over the next 2 months, Silas systematically siphoned liquid assets. He didn't steal. He simply utilized his own corporate. He billed his consultancy firm for exorbitant, legitimate-looking expenses, funneling the money into a pristine, untouchable trust established under his children's names, with Elias acting as the ironclad executor. To Veronica and Beatrice, the bank accounts looked perfectly normal, propped up by carefully manipulated credit lines that Silas was secretly preparing to default on the moment he vanished. He also found a new home. A sprawling, sunlit property 3 towns over, nestled next to a highly rated elementary school. He spent his lunch breaks buying furniture, painting bedrooms in his children's favorite colors, and enrolling them in their new classes. He was building a fortress of peace while living in a war zone, but Silas wasn't content with just an escape. A tumor must be completely excised or it grows back. Tristan was the first domino to fall. Silas compiled a meticulously edited 30-minute montage of Tristan and Veronica's most explicit encounters, intercut with audio of Tristan mocking his own wife's recent weight gain. Silas loaded the file onto a sleek silver flash drive, placed it in a velvet jewelry box, and mailed it to Tristan's wife via anonymous courier. Silas watched the fallout from his second-story office window 3 days later. It was a Tuesday afternoon. The quiet suburban street was suddenly shattered by the sound of breaking glass. Tristan's front door flew open, and a shower of expensive golf clubs, tailored suits, and a shattered flat-screen television rained down onto the manicured lawn, followed by Tristan himself, scrambling backward as his weeping, furious wife hurled his prized espresso machine at his head. Within 48 hours, Tristan was living in a motel, his marriage incinerated, his reputation in their affluent neighborhood reduced to ash. Veronica watched the spectacle from the kitchen window, her face pale, her knuckles white as she gripped the marble countertop. Silas simply sipped his black coffee, watching her panic quietly bloom. She had no idea the fire was already spreading to her own house. The climax of Silas's deliverance arrived on a rainy Thursday evening. He had sent the children to a sleepover at a trusted friend's house. The sprawling estate was eerily quiet, save for the rhythmic drumming of rain against the bay windows. He called Veronica and Beatrice into his home office. The room was dark, illuminated only by the harsh blue glare of a high-definition projector aimed at the blank white wall. Veronica entered first, crossing her arms, her stilettos clicking sharply against the hardwood. "Make this quick, Silas, I have a headache, and your mother and I were discussing the holiday schedule." Beatrice glided in behind her, wearing her usual expression of polite disdain. "Really, Silas, sitting in the dark? Have you forgotten to pay the electric bill again? We were just talking about your memory issues." Silas didn't speak. He reached out and pressed the spacebar on his laptop. The wall ignited with light and sound. The first clip was crystal clear. Veronica and Tristan in the master bedroom. Her voice echoing through the office speakers as she detailed how she planned to spend Silas's life insurance if the stress of the psychiatric ward gave him a convenient heart attack. Veronica's jaw unhinged. The color drained from her face so fast she looked like a wax mannequin. She took a stumbling step backward, her hand flying to her mouth. Before she could speak, the video cut. Now it was Beatrice, sitting in the very kitchen they were just in, handing a thick envelope of cash to the corrupt doctor, explicitly stating, "Just make sure the diagnosis says paranoid schizophrenia. It makes the asset transfer much cleaner." Beatrice's polite disdain shattered. Her knees buckled slightly, and she caught herself on the edge of a leather armchair, her breath hitching in a wet, ragged gasp. Silas paused the video, leaving a freeze frame of his mother's face, twisted in malice, glowing 10 feet tall on the wall. He stood up, buttoning his suit jacket with slow, deliberate precision. He had never looked taller, never looked more terrifyingly composed. "Here is the reality of your current situation," Silas said, his voice dropping to a low, resonant timbre that neither woman had ever heard before. "That footage, along with 3 terabytes of financial records, wire fraud evidence, and recordings of you attempting to manipulate a minor into committing perjury, is currently sitting on the desks of 3 different federal prosecutors, the State Medical Board and the Judicial Oversight Committee. Silas, sweetheart, you're confused. Beatrice stammered, her voice trembling violently as she tried to reconstruct her maternal mask. We were worried about your health. Do not insult my intelligence, Silas snapped, the sharpness of his tone cracking through the room like a whip. He picked up two thick manila folders from his desk and tossed them onto the glass coffee table. You have two options. Option A, you walk out of this house right now with nothing but the clothes on your backs. You sign these documents relinquishing all parental rights, all claims to the marital assets, and you disappear. You never contact me, you never look at my children, you never so much as breathe in our direction again. In exchange, the encrypted emails to the authorities remain scheduled on a delay. They will never send. Silas leaned forward, resting his knuckles on the desk. Option B, you refuse, I press enter. By tomorrow morning, Beatrice, you will be in federal custody for conspiracy to commit medical fraud and bribery of a judicial official. You will die in a concrete cell. Veronica, you will face extortion charges, and I will personally ensure the ensuing civil litigation leaves you with a negative net worth for the rest of your natural life. Silence descended on the room, heavy and suffocating. The arrogance that had fueled them for years evaporated in the span of 3 minutes, replaced by the stark, undeniable terror of absolute ruin. Veronica looked at Beatrice, her eyes wide, begging for a way out. But the older woman just stared at the floor, her hands shaking violently. The architect of his destruction had been outplayed. With a trembling hand, Veronica picked up the pen. By midnight, the house was empty. The silence that filled the halls was no longer oppressive. It was the quiet exhale of a battlefield after the war has been won. Silas walked through the pristine, sterile rooms one last time, feeling the phantom weight of years of emotional abuse lifting from his shoulders. He didn't lock the door on his way out. The bank would be taking possession of the property by Monday anyway, thanks to the massive, defaulted loans he had left solely in Veronica's name. Life has a way of violently correcting itself when you finally decide to take the wheel. The fallout for the conspirators was biblical. Without Silas's money to protect her, Beatrice's past indiscretions were dragged into the light, leading to the quiet, humiliating loss of her country club memberships and her entire social circle. She lived out her days in a cramped, one-bedroom apartment, completely isolated. Veronica, drowning in debt and completely abandoned by a ruined Tristan, was forced to take a minimum-wage retail job just to survive, her vanity stripped away by the harsh glare of fluorescent lights and crushing poverty. Meanwhile, miles away in a sunlit house filled with the sounds of children laughing, Silas found his sanctuary. He learned that true strength isn't about enduring abuse. It's about the quiet, meticulous courage it takes to build a door where there was once only a wall. He had walked through the fire of betrayal and emerged not as ashes, but as forged steel. Sometimes the monsters aren't hiding under your bed. They are sitting across from you at the dinner table, smiling while they pour the wine. It takes immense bravery to recognize the toxicity in the people who are supposed to love you, and even more strength to surgically remove them from your life. If you found value in this story of reclaiming power, of standing up to manipulation and protecting the innocent, please hit that subscribe button, leave a like, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Your support helps bring more stories of resilience, justice, and the triumph of the human spirit to light. Until next time, stay vigilant and never let anyone convince you that you don't deserve peace.